test. Let's do a test there real quick before my booming voice comes. There we go. All right, we'll let everybody get settled in here. We are in Ecclesiastes chapter 6. I thank Dennis for chapter 4 and 5, but Dennis isn't done yet. I got some more dates coming his way, so just trying to. We're about in the middle of the quarter, so we're at a good pace here. I'll probably try to get us through 6 tonight because there's so much more in the remaining chapters. So Ecclesiastes chapter 6. Let's begin our class with a word of prayer, if you'd bow with me. Our Almighty God, we approach your throne just full of gratitude for the love that you've shown us through your Son Jesus, for the provisions in this life as we go through this journey. And we're grateful that we have the wisdom of Solomon to guide us through this when we get caught up in life and start getting worried about stuff. Solomon helps us reflect that the most important thing is to set our mind and our heart on you. Help us in this journey. Help us to be an example to those going through this journey. And we just thank you for this opportunity. We ask this through your Son, Jesus. Amen. Okay, Ecclesiastes chapter 6. I did send out some questions. They might change a little bit. Keep in mind, a lot of my questions are more just to kind of generate thought. We may address some directly. We may address some indirectly. But I haven't asked this question in a while, so I know it's probably going to throw you a little bit. I got a couple I want to share with you, but up to this point, I think Dennis kind of had a question along these lines, so if you wanted to go back that far, but are there any phrases or words that stood out for you up to this point that have helped you how you ought to live your life in this book that might appear a little depressing at the Yes, Adam.
In chapter 4, 1 handful of rest is better than 2 fists full of labor and striving after it.
And why did that stand out for you?
Well, it just goes back to this point of moderation. You don't have to put everything into one thing because you're never going to find fulfillment in that. So, get a little bit of it, be content with it.
Right.
And don't overwork yourself with any more thing.
I don't know if this is what you were thinking, but when you said that, I went to, all your eggs in one basket, kind of thinking, you don't have to do that. Any other verses, anything stand out? Yes, Jerry.
Chapter 5, verse 1, guard your steps when you go to the house of God.
Okay, why that one?
Just because God is clearly a loving God, full of mercy, full of patience, but he's also not to be trifled with. And we need to take great care in how we come before him.
Yes, excellent. Anything else stand out for anybody? I've got a couple here. I'm going to share a couple. Let's go back to chapter 4. These are a couple things that stood out for me in Dennis's classes. In 4, 9 through 12, I'm going to read that. 2 are better than 1 because they have good reward for their toil. They fall, one will lift his fellow up. Woe to him who is alone when he falls and has none to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. And the reason why that one stood out for me is just the simple fact of it's not good to be alone. If there was one takeaway for me on that one, and God never intended for us to go it alone. God didn't intend this to be a solo journey. That's why he created family. But so many things stood out for me in those verses of just the idea that I just imagine standing with a brother or a sister in Christ. Not just a marriage, just not that aspect of it, but be able to have a brother or sister in Christ stand with me or me stand with a brother during a tumultuous or a difficult time, to get somebody's back. To be in a situation to let a brother know that I'm here for you as you go through this. So many things came to my mind when I thought about that one. Another one for me was also in chapter 5, verses 3 through 7. Talking about a vow, I thought Dennis brought some good questions on that. But another thing that stood out for me, and I think about this every time I read that section in chapter 5, is I understand the importance of vows, and if you're going to say something, keep it. But I also thought about the simplicity of that my word is important. The words that roll off my tongue. I don't have to pinky promise. I don't have to say I vow. I don't have to say I made this promise. when I say things, if I say I'm going to do something, then I need to do them. My word, we say that our word is our bond. That's one of the things that I drew from that section of just how important the things that roll out of our heart. And he says later on there, be careful. Don't let your words be too many, because it's real easy, isn't it? And I don't want to take away from Dennis's class. I thought he had some great thoughts, but it's real easy to get wrapped up in saying all the great things we're going to do and the differences we're going to make, but we don't. That was a stern warning. It was a warning for me. Scott, be careful. Anything else jump out at you? Anybody have any other ones there before we get moving into chapter 6? All right, keep thinking about those as we're going through. All right, chapter 6, we're going to have, I want somebody to think about reading this for us. It's a short chapter. You can think about that for a moment. But I was looking for some words of wisdom to kick this chapter off. And my mind went back to a particular television series that aired on Saturday nights, 1968 through the early 90s, okay? I'm not saying I'm proud of watching this show, but the show was called Hee Haw, all right? And it was a silly show I had to watch with my grandparents, all right? And there were two guys that would get on, and they would talk about the despairs of life. And I'm not going to sing it, all right? But these were the words. Some of you know, doom or gloom, despair, and agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I've had no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. And they would go on to talk about some misfortune that happened to them. I couldn't show a picture of it because they had moonshine bottles in their hand, and I didn't think that was appropriate. But nonetheless, I thought this was kind of a great way to kick off chapter 6, because that's how you feel when you read this. Who wants to read it? I want to get somebody to read it. I want to give you some things to think about. Chapter 6. All right. Brother Bird, here, get ready in just a moment. But I want you to think about a couple things as Brian gets ready to read this. Be thinking about, I want you to notice the disappointments that Solomon brings out. He's going to list a number of disappointments in this chapter. I want you to be thinking about your destiny. Be thinking about your destiny and how much you do or don't have control of it. I want you to be thinking about contentment. I think one of the themes that stands out in chapter 6, even though we don't read the word, is the idea of contentment. So be mindful of these. Brian, go for it.
There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, he has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place? All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wondering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? All
right, a couple things I want to point out here, just some facts. In this chapter, the word vanity or vain appears 5 times, verse 2, 4, 9, 11, and 12. Throughout the whole chapter, you see this sad refrain, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Twice he says it's an evil, once a grievous evil. Twice he says he's not satisfied. This may be one of the saddest chapters in the book of Ecclesiastes. So different from the end of chapter 5. Go back to chapter 5. Somebody read 18 through 20 for us. Somebody grab that. Read 18 through 20, and then we're going to look at 1 and 2. Who's got it? Aaron.
Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart.
Okay, Aaron, I'm going to ask you to read 1 and 2 again of 6.
There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil.
All right. Anybody see a difference between the end of 5 and then 6, 1, and 2? Anything jump out at you? Seth.
It just reminds me of myself and everybody else that I know. You know, we go through life and there are times when we're feeling great and we're like, yeah, so happy to be alive. There's so many good things to enjoy. And then something can happen out of the blue and completely change our attitude for the next day or two until we ride the roller coaster back up again. So I feel like this is kind of his, in a way, like his stream of consciousness where he's going through and getting out all these feelings
Right.
until he ultimately comes to the conclusion at the end of the book.
Yeah, exactly. Tim and then Ed.
What jumped
Yes.
out at me is where it says that God gives the power to enjoy these things, and then God does not give some the power to enjoy these things.
What's up?
I'm a bit perplexed by that, but yeah.
So we're going to come back to that. We're going to kind of hold that thought. But that was the one that jumped out for me. And I like what Seth had to say too. Ed, I got you here in a second. I like what Seth had to say too. You're enjoying this ride. And then, God is good. And then all of a sudden you have this moment where you seem to forget. All right. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but somebody else enjoys your hard work. And it's depressing and gets you all bent out of shape. And then God giving us this power of enjoyment. And then we get into chapter 6, and God says, I'm not going to let you enjoy this. And we'll talk about that. But Ed.
Yeah, I like bringing 5 and 6 together, because what you have there then is, this is the way he tells us we're supposed to live at the end of 5. And then the 6 seems to then be a way of in a way I would read that differently to emphasize the point is instead of saying there is one who, I would say, and yet you go out and enjoy your life, and yet you work and you do all this stuff, and God doesn't give you the power to enjoy it. Well, why not? Well, because you're not wise enough to do what God commanded you to and rejoice in it. And so if one looks at it that way, it's not the only way to look at it. The kind of more natural way is to stop at 5 and pretend like there's this big gap, and then you kind of have this guy who's, like you say, flipping back and forth. But if you look at this as a consistent teaching, he's saying altogether, God has given you something that can empower you, and that is for you to choose to rejoice in this. Now, if you walk away from that, you don't have power to enjoy any of this. This is what you're buying. You're buying chapter 6.
Right.
Which is a pretty cool way to contrast the good and the bad.
Right? Yeah. Good point. Roy.
It's because he says these are great evils does not make it evil.
So I had that as a question, not up on the board. What does he mean by that? Great? Because we think of great evils, what comes to our mind? We might think a sin or something. What does he mean by these evils? Yeah, a calamity. Roy, did you have another thought on that?
Well, I think He thinks it's something that shouldn't happen, and
Right.
he uses the term evil for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't use that term today. I have not heard it, but we know that something awful has happened, and so a lot of times when you hear that word evil, associate with a calamity or an awfulness or a tragedy. This is just unbelievable. Steve.
Verse 1, where it talks about there is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. Well, even today, outside the church, in the world, you see people that are not Christians. A lot of times, they're just evil. They do bad things. They don't do nice things, but it's not that way in the church. We all have brotherly love and kind to one another, but out in the world is totally different than in the church.
Right? That's true. That's true. And I think that's part of the focus that Solomon wants us to have is this above the sun mentality. Dave.
The word evil is interesting. It's the same word as bad, effectively, right?
Right.
So, like the knowledge of good and this word, right? We think of evil, we think of something very sinister and usually associated with people and motives and things. And I think in this context, it's good for us just to say bad. There is a badness that I've seen under the sun. Meaning, it's not good. It's the opposite of that. So, because I know that our tendency is we see evil to think, oh man, there's something really going on here, and I don't know that it is that.
I think sinister was a good word. We kind of associate that. Let's see another hand. Yeah. Dennis.
Yeah. It reminds me back to chapter 3. There's a time to tear down and a time to build up. There's a time when I feel torn down. There's a time when I feel built up. There's a time when I feel like weeping. There's a time when I feel like laughing. We find the same thing here in chapter 6. It's into chapter 5, into chapter 6. It's the time of life. These things happen.
Right.
And we have to learn how to deal with them. And hopefully we can find the wisdom to do that.
Exactly. So as we roll into this, we're going to talk about Solomon's disappointments here, or the things that he identified here in a moment. Just another thing to point out in the chapter 5 and 6 connection is God is mentioned 4 times in those last 4 verses, and then God is mentioned once in chapter 6, verse 1. Just interesting how things kind of shift, all right? So let's talk about these disappointments, all right? Maybe there's another word for that. What's the first disappointment that Solomon talks about it? We just read it. What's the first one? What's the first grievous evil that he saw? We just kind of said it. So what's the first one? I call it possessions without enjoyment. All right. So look at verses 1 and 2 again. Aaron already read those for us. All right. Do you think he's reflecting on himself here? 2 said yes. Yeah, I agree. Here's this super rich guy, right? That's what I'm seeing in 1 and 2. When I look at 1 and 2, or excuse me, actually verse 2, God gives wealth, possessions, and honor so that he lacks nothing. So he's complete, all right? He's probably worth a fortune. If it's Solomon who we're talking about, who I think he's just... I think a lot of this is Solomon looking back. I know everybody has a little different perspective on this. Is he an older gentleman looking back? Who was the other writer here? But I kind of give this, I look at Ecclesiastes kind of somebody looking back and sharing with us this journey. I might miss a few things on that, but that's what stands out for me. But he's getting all this stuff, but yet God does not give him the power to enjoy it. Unlike the man or the individual at the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 5 who's enjoying life. Now the question is that I want to put out to you, why does God not give him the power to enjoy it? What does Solomon mean by that? I think there's an answer there, but I think there's a couple of thoughts on this. Allison.
Well, I'm not positive, but there are a few things that spring to mind for me. One is if you die, then you can't enjoy it any longer. Obviously, that's not him because he's writing it, so he's not dead right now. But there's also if you own a bunch of properties, let's say, I don't mean this is a hypothetical. I've got a cabin in Tahoe, I've got a beach house, I've got my regular house, I can't be in all those places at once. I can only be in one place. And so even if I travel to those places, or we know Solomon, he had gardens, he had wives, he had concubines, he had singers, he had slaves, but there's only so much you can cram into one day. So,
True.
I mean, he was not enjoying all of these things that he had because of the abundance.
Yeah. What's interesting, he doesn't specify. He doesn't specify, but I think that's a lot of it. Janet?
Allison's comment makes me think about some of these very rich people that have an entourage around them, and the people around them enjoy a lot of benefits from this person, but a lot of times that person, whether it's Elvis Presley or Michael Jackson or Donald Trump or whoever, they are so busy and overwhelmed with the things that they do that make those possessions that they don't get to enjoy it.
Right.
But all the people around them do get a benefit from it. So that's kind of what I think of sometimes, because I have heard, I don't know myself, but I've heard that it can weigh heavy on you. I don't know.
Yes, and I think another thought, I've got a couple hands popping up. Another thought that came to my mind, that's why I said he doesn't specify. He says there, look at that second verse, all right? God does not give him the power to enjoy, but a stranger enjoys them. I did it, kind of like Allison, I did another hypothetical, all right? So Allison talked about the cabin and so let's say I build my cabin in the woods, and I got my house in the hill, and I've got a condominium in another country, and then God says, Scott, tonight your life is demanded of you. That's another thought. All of a sudden, wait, don't I get to enjoy these things that I built? Don't you remember, Lord, I filled my barns? Remember all those barns that Jesus talked about? I stored up my barns, and he says, tonight your soul is demanded of you. Aaron, and then I think I had another hand over here.
Yeah, I think there's, a variety of circumstances that would mean that someone did not get to enjoy this.
Right.
Maybe they're afflicted with a health problem. Maybe they are, like Janet said, have so much responsibility for things that they can't, enjoy them. Maybe they, there's just so many things that it could be.
Yeah, that's just it. There's so many things that it could be that you don't want to drill down on one thing. You don't still want to try to camp on one thing. I think it kind of comes back to what Ed was pointing out earlier, is the idea of there's a reason why you're not enjoying this. Whether it's because of this or that, it's because of your perspective. Roy, and then Ed, and then we'll come over here.
I think you're right. You shouldn't blame
Yeah.
because he's already given instructions, that these blessings come from God.
Right.
And if he can't enjoy them, that's not God's fault. But the part that's difficult for me is the stranger that's enjoying it. And I have trouble applying that to Solomon because I don't think that happened. And it doesn't say, family quarreling over the belongings or that type of thing. It calls them a stranger. So, I'm sitting here in my mind trying to figure out what stranger could enjoy anybody's wealth. And the only way that could happen is in the courts or something.
Right.
Where they take it away from them.
So yeah, probably not kids, not family, somebody unknown. So Ed and then Dennis.
Because stranger is a word that was used for resident aliens, and was associated indirectly then with the exile that Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 to 32 promise, if you want to call it that, where they said, look, if you don't obey these things, there are these curses that are going to fall on you. And finally, if you get down to the end of it, you're going to go into exile. And so the one thing we know is that the people of God received every one of the blessings that's listed there. They were honored, they were wealthy, they were everything, and then they didn't get to enjoy it. Instead, an alien enjoyed it, and the reason is because they violated the covenant of God.
Exactly. I think that's a good point. Excellent. Dennis, thought?
Yeah, a little bit different take. I mean, Yeah, there could be a lot of things, but the one thing that is mentioned, and the word for is usually a word of reason. What's the reason that he's not empowered? For a foreigner enjoys them. And we've seen this, not just foreigner enjoying it, all of a sudden you die without being able to leave it inheritance to your child, or you just simply die short of the time when you could enjoy it. It may be something that is justice because he has not learned to enjoy them, but it's interesting in both verse 19 of chapter 5 and verse 2, God has given riches and wealth. Both of these fellows have riches and wealth. And the one thing that's going on here is a foreigner enjoys them. So we're looking at a situation where maybe God did or didn't do that. God is sovereign.
Right.
There could be some connection here to the fact that God is sovereign. He is in control ultimately.
Right.
Going back to chapter 3, so I'm kind of going with that these things happen. And it could be by some fault of his own, but I'm looking here, I see that it's a foreigner enjoying them. And I don't see that he's done anything wrong.
Yeah, so the bottom line, I think, for this is just straight up frustrating. To me, it's just frustrating to look at this. What do I mean by that? I don't get to enjoy my hard work. So why is Solomon hammering this? All right, what is it that Solomon wants us to see? And I think the idea here is become desperate enough that we look up and we see satisfaction in God. And I know that's just kind of the resounding theme throughout this whole thing, but just when we feel that way, it comes back to what Seth said a little bit ago about that kind of roller coaster ride. When you get in the low end and you're just focused on life isn't fair, I'm not being appreciated, whatever you want to apply to that, that's in that moment of despair, Solomon says, I want you to look up, all right? Because that's what Solomon did. I want to move on here. Let's go to another one here. Look at verses 3 through 6. All right, and I called this one Better Off Dead. All right, because there's some strong things in here, but I want to kind of set the tune for you here. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, all right, two things stand out there. Two vital images for the ancient Israelites. What two things were very, very important for the Israelites? I just read for Israelite man. I just read them. Children and a long life. All right? He's going somewhere with this. All right? Lots of children. Children and long life. The two of the fondest desires. Psalms 127. All right? Blessed is a man whose quiver is full of them. I probably told you this one time. The kids got me that license plate, and I wish I could get it back for our old truck because we had 5 kids, and it was QVR FUL 5, Quiverful 5. And people would pull up to me and say, oh, are you into archery? So I had to get a license plate frame with the Bible verse on it. No, I'm not into archery. Quiverful. So anyway, there's my little story. But that was a really special gift, all right? But two things here. Long life. All right. Why a lot of children? Why do you think that was important? I think the scriptures will point out, but why was that important to we're going to say an Israelite man? Or, Dave.
Retirement plan.
That's exactly right. That was a retirement plan. I got 5 chances with my kids. I saw a hand, Dennis.
I agree. And agriculture, right?
Yes.
So while you're alive and then as you're aging.
That's right. Yeah, it was one of the greatest components of life. And so they provided so many things, the agriculture, the farm life, the retirement, they provided a lot. And if you had a lot of children, you were looked up to. That was, wow, you were honorable. That's why if a family or a woman was barren, they were looked down upon. Aaron.
Well, and it's also a legacy, right?
Yep.
So it's this, there's been a lot of talk in Ecclesiastes about remembrance, and so it's kind of like the more your line is out there, right, the more you're going to be remembered. And I guess this point is kind of like, what does it matter to you if you didn't enjoy your life?
Right.
Whether you're remembered after you're
Exactly. And why living a long life? I know that sounds kind of like a softball question, but why is that important? What's some things that pop in your head? You know, life was hard back then. I mean, let me read a couple of facts, all right? Roughly half of all children died before the age of 5. Youth and young adulthood were very hazardous. In a world with only the most rudimentary medical care, disease threatened everyone. Beyond that, the complications of childbirth took the lives of many women. Working in the fields were dangerous because of war and so many other things. So in other words, back then, so you've got these things that, but why long life?
Well, it's an indication that it wasn't cut short.
Yeah, exactly. Growing old is it's really cool. Just want you all to know. It's really cool, all right? Right.
Well, long life was viewed as a prosperous life also.
Right. Yeah, they were associated together. Dennis?
Maybe it was evidence that you honored your father and mother.
Exactly. That's right. Let's look at a couple things in these passages, though. All right. I want in 3 through 6. All right. So we read 3. Look at the latter part of 3. His soul is not satisfied with life's good things. He also has no burial. Something else in there. What's he mean by that? What else was important? A long life, right? A prosperous life. And when you died, what was expected? A proper burial. I think that's what he's referring to, a proper burial. Not getting that. Aaron?
Yeah, and I think that's related to the children, right? So
Right.
you have all these children who should be taking care of that, and they're not. So what does that say about your life?
Right. Look at the latter verse. These verses just really get me. A stillborn child is better off than he, for it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to one place? To me, this is one of the most depressing thoughts, right? To say that. Because basically what he's saying, it's better if I had never been born. If I'm going to sit back and watch everybody enjoy all the stuff that I've done, for whatever reason, any of the reasons that we put out there, all this is going on, this tumultuous life, this life of disappointment, the stillborn, what an advantage. Can you imagine? The stillborn doesn't have to come out and experience this stuff. Whew, better off. Just better off, you know? It enters and leaves in darkness. It doesn't have to come into this world, right? And to me, that is an extremely depressing and uncomforting thought when I think about that. Yes, Mark.
I think it's really showing us that the life without God is worthless. It's not worth living at all. It gets back to the first 2 chapters, that the ability to enjoy life comes from God, and that comes from a relationship that you have with God. That's right. And that's why you can enjoy it. A person who does not have that relationship, if they have everything, they can't enjoy it. And it would be much better off to go, instead of living through all this vanity and angst and being upset with it, to just have been born stillborn. So all you do is you're with God and you're with God. You don't have to live through all that anxiety, and you're with God the whole time.
All right. That's right. Let me clarify what I mean by depressing. Just to look at life like that for me. Just to look at life through this, I'd have been better off dead. But you answered the question, all right? The reason is he has no relationship with God. That's why he's looking at life this way. We have a relationship with God. We don't look at life this way. At least I try not to. I'm not going to say I don't. I try not to. I try not to look at that way. Let's go on. Any questions on that one? Because I want to move on to the next one. All right, let's look at 7 through 9. Let's look at that one again. All the toil for a man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool, and what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. All right. So I put on this one, what I say, surviving is not thriving. What's he talking about? What's the appetite? Let's identify the appetite. He's using kind of a metaphor or the idea of hunger, but what does he mean by the appetite? We see this a lot in Scripture. The appetite, but we're never satisfied. We see this a lot in Ecclesiastes. We see some of it in Proverbs. Janet and then Ed.
It sounds to me like when he's talking about that appetite that can't be satisfied, that it's talking about our appetite for stuff, our appetite for things. Because when he says that which verse is it? Okay, all the labor of man is for his mouth, yet the soul is not satisfied. I feel like, to me, it sounds like he's saying essentially the work we do is to feed ourselves, to survive. But for some of us, if that's not enough and we have this constant desire that can't be satiated, then that is, that's an evil or a vanity or, a vexation. Because really, all we need is what we need, not all the other stuff.
Yeah, what we need. On the other hand. Yes, Ed.
The idea of the eye versus the appetite, which is the stomach, is kind of interesting because what your eye sees is actually really there. Whereas appetite implies imagination, covetousness.
Right.
And so that, like Janet was saying, sometimes, well, I guess mindfulness is kind of the modern, jargon thing about it. Sometimes you have to just stop and pay attention to what's really there. Pay attention to the now, and not keep living in this appetite that can never be satisfied. And I don't know exactly how that connects to the guy who couldn't enjoy what he had, but somehow it all kind of hangs together. But I think part of it just has to do with enjoying what we do have.
Right, and I think that's where hopefully the discussion of contentment is going to come in here, either tonight or on Sunday morning. Aaron.
Yeah, it's that idea of, the grass is greener on the other side, right? It's not on the side that's right in front of you. You're constantly looking further away for what's better than what's in front of you.
Right,
And,
right.
The other saying related to the grass being green is that the grass is green where you water it. And so that's, invest in what you have in front of you.
Right, good point. Carolyn and then Seth.
The end of 5, when it talks about God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and the difference in that in chapter 6 is that to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. It talks a lot about the man's toil in chapter 5, and in chapter 6 it's just his toil isn't for daily life. I mean, Solomon had his gardens and he built the temple and he helped rebuild cities and all of these things that were not for his own self. And that's where I see it coming back around in verse 7. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. What advantage has the wise man over the fool? And I think the difference has to be our perspective and our work and how we enjoy things, and not that we're constantly in the pursuit of things that we can't have time to enjoy.
Right. Good point. So
to piggyback on what Erin was saying, since she's reciting modern Proverbs, I think verse 9, where he says, "What the eye sees is better than what the soul desires." I think that's the idea here of that we express as a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush. That you should be happy and try to take joy in what you have instead of constantly looking to see if you can get something better out there, because you're never going to be satisfied.
Right. And how do we settle on that? You know what I'm saying? How do we, I mean, I'm trying to think of modern day examples where, I don't want to say harmless, but I'm trying to think of things that, you know, we want something better. We want something stronger. We've got to have this. I'll give you a weak example, all right? I'm looking at Jay. Jay and I have 2 off-road vehicles that we've built, all right? And I know Jay and I have both said, you know, for a little bit more, we could add this. Haven't we had that conversation, Jay? We could put this on it, we can put that on, but I'll have to work a little harder. I might have to say, take a second job. I may have to, you know, do something like this. But I could put this on the rig, and then it could do this. And then what I found is, begins to happen, and it happened for me. I had to say, I got it where I want it. Let it go, Scott. It serves my purpose. Right? And it could be anything. It could be something like that or anything in that. And so, but that's hard to find, isn't it? It's hard at times to stop and go, I'm okay here. I'm content here. And if something great comes along and a new opportunity that I could take advantage of, and I mean that in a very positive way, that I could still glorify God, great. But if not, it's okay. And that's one of the things Solomon, I think, is trying to tell us. It's okay. I saw a hand. Was it Dennis? Did you have a thought?
Yeah, well, no, I like that. That's probably better than what I was. Example, I have those from a movie, true story. Nashville Eye Clinic. Doctor came over from China, helping people restore their sight. Amazing story. One brother, though, constantly looking for the next free meal, big scheme, rather than just, you know, going with what you have. You've got to go with the big scheme, and
right.
This kind of reminds me of that.
Right. I thought I wrote down with this idea of appetite is let your mind be in control, not your mouth. You know, you mentioned that. Let your mind and your heart and your wisdom be in control, not your appetite. Because that's right, we're never, ever going to satisfy it. Jack?
I'll just throw this out here, and I guess it kind of applies, but I'm just continually overwhelmingly impressed. The solution to so much stuff of me and frustration is serving people.
Right.
I mean, it's just amazing. Whether I'm feeling bad or depressed or start getting frustrated or trying to avoid about building bigger barns or all those things. And, you know, if I needed it, which I don't, the evidence is the church. The church is designed for exactly that. No one in the church should ever be homeless or lacking, unless all of us are.
Right.
And it's just an amazing thing, and any kind of thing that you look at, whether it's a government or a team or a corporation, is going to follow that model if it is successful.
Right.
Whether they're doing it on purpose or not. And all of these things that we've been talking about, I think we could maybe even trace back to the garden, right? The knowledge of good and evil. Once that happened, there's frustration. And we have all these other things that are attractive in the world, but maybe I'm wrong, but you can never be frustrated serving people. I mean, I guess somebody could be like, well, they're not grateful for it, but God knows.
That's right.
And you can just continually do that. And it's always helping. And if everyone did that, there would just be this abundance of everything good instead of all of us going our own way and staying alone, which we already talked about is not bad, but, you know, it's just a solution to so many things.
Yeah. Excellent. Brady, did you have a thought about this up here?
I was totally thinking that same thing. If there's a chance that we're going to be doing all this labor that we don't enjoy, and then the foreigner gets to enjoy it instead of us, then maybe what we should do is really quick give it to people that we know, that aren't foreigners, that we love. Really fast, like do it now when we can, right? And what is the net result of that?
Right.
We do that.
I had a question in here kind of along those lines, and I skipped it kind of on purpose. Thought maybe we'd come back to it, is what about this stuff that goes to a stranger, all right, that we talked about quite a bit. It goes to a stranger or somebody else, and I'm all disappointed. Maybe I could find happiness on that.
Right.
Maybe what Solomon is telling us, okay, if somebody gets it, be happy that it's going to make a difference in their life. That's kind of the spin I'm getting from your comments. That, you know, be happy that somebody else is going to get it. I remember a preacher one time, it was years ago, he started a gospel meeting, and I was there. Somebody broke into his car and stole his Bible. Can you believe it? Stealing your Bible when you're getting ready to preach? I mean, what's up? I'll never forget what he said. He says, I hope it does them a lot of good. And he grabbed another Bible and preached a sermon. All right, thank you very much. Lord willing, we'll see you on Sunday, and we'll wrap this chapter 6, maybe get it to 7. Thank you.
no announcements tonight, so we will be going straight into our songs. Our first song before the invitation will be number 15 in the supplemental book, Exalted. Known before the world, lives by righteous will be number 348.
Good evening. I'm going to give a couple examples to start out with, and they're a little bit far-fetched, but they're meant to be, so it's okay if they sound a little bit not practical or not real. But think if you've ever done this or known somebody to do this, but you do all the work, you get prepared to run a race. You do all the conditioning, and you get ready for race day, and you get out there, and you race, and you beat everybody in the race, but you don't get a medal because you never actually put your name in to enter the race. Or maybe you didn't even have a lane. You were running on the side in the dirt, and you ran the race, you did all the work, but no prize given because you didn't enter into the race. Or maybe you have a drawing for the best painting, and you do all the work, and you do the painting, you meet all the requirements, and all you have to do is turn it in, and you get a prize. But you do the work, and then you just don't turn it in. That might sound pretty absurd, and it is, but I think we can be at risk of that in the church because I think some of the examples that we read of conversions in the New Testament are a little bit different from what we experience today, because we don't have the same type of scenarios that, say, Saul turned Paul did. He had that flash of light. He was doing the exact wrong thing. Jesus appeared to him and puts him on the right track. Paul, when he goes to Ephesus, and people were trying to do the right thing, but they only knew the baptism of John, and so he teaches them Jesus, and so then they're baptized into Jesus immediately. Or Philip and the Ethiopian. The Ethiopian was trying to follow what the Old Testament required, didn't know about Jesus. He was taught that, and he says, hey, here's water. What prevents me from getting baptized? But for us today, especially if you've grown up into the church and you kind of know all of this, then there's not this aha moment. There's not this flash of light where it's suddenly you know what the truth is. It's kind of more of a gradual thing that happens over time. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you know what the truth is, you believe that Jesus is the Son of God and not that he was born to God in heaven, but he's eternal, he's always existed, but he came and entered into this world, his creation, by being born of a woman, but it was through
the miraculous Holy Spirit. And that's why Jesus is called the Son of God, because he had no earthly father. His father was God, because of that. And, you believe that Jesus died on the cross. You believe that it's for your sins. You believe that you have sins and you need to be forgiven. We can believe all of these things, but if we never take that one step because we're waiting for something, when really we should be asking, what prevents me? Why am I not taking this step? If you believe all of these things, then there is no reason not to take that final step. You're in danger of running the race, being committed, and not getting the prize at the end. So if you find that you're in that situation tonight where you're asking yourself and all of these things, you believe that Jesus is the Christ, you believe he's the Son of God, you believe you have sins, you need to be forgiven, and that Jesus died to do that, and you don't have something else saying, well, what's stopping me from committing my life to God? Then we're going to encourage you to do that tonight as together we stand and sing the invitation song.
Oh.